as time flies by, you'll open up your eyes wide. You feel it's gonna go your way. Hey, hey, it's a brand new day. Hey, 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 it's a brand new day.
We've talked about tourism, we've talked about death, and now we're talking about the death of the relationship of Great Britain with Europe, or the upcoming separation with Brexit. Charmaine Arbouin, our British consul. Dare I even ask, do you even know anything different from a year ago? I mean, is anything advanced? Do we have any dates? Anything?
Well, yeah, what's changed from a year ago? That's a good question. So, what we had right from the beginning was the Prime Minister sort of saying, and I think the other European Union member states being really clear that what they saw as a priority was securing citizens' rights. And I'm kind of painfully aware, Nicole, that lots of Brits that are living in Spain, in the south of Spain, decided to come and live here because it was a country that was part of the European Union, and we were, that it meant that access to healthcare was going to be a lot easier, that we knew that our pensions were going to be protected, that we kind of understood the education system and the healthcare system, and that it was really easy to come and go, that we didn't need to have a visa to work. And so our decisions were made on the basis of what the situation was then. And fast forward 2016, suddenly there's a referendum that lots of us weren't able to vote in, yeah?
Which is shocking, honestly, in itself, and I still
Exactly.
can't accept it. But
and the carpet is pulled from under your feet. And 2 years later, it feels to a lot of people like, I still really don't know what I should do. Is there a future for me here? Should I stay here? Will I be able to stay here? If you're an older person and you've been very dependent on your pension, will my pension continue to rise with the rate of inflation? Will I continue to have access to the healthcare system? Or am I going to suddenly be expected to take out healthcare
or
insurance?
even get the pension over here to Spain,
Exactly.
because there are a lot of facilities at the moment that
for
you
doing
can
that.
for doing that.
Absolutely. So there's some good news, yeah, which I think we could all do with, really. So what's changed since last year? We have broad agreements with all of the member states on citizens' rights. Not everything, but a lot of the important things that broadly allow us to continue to live, to work, to use the healthcare system, to receive our pensions. So we have agreement on those things. What everyone always says to me whenever I go out and do events is, yeah, but nothing's agreed until everything's agreed. And I have to put my hands up and say that's absolutely true. But having negotiated quite hard on those citizens' rights, it's very difficult for me to believe that we would lose that at this point, that we would let everything just go, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
But not just for us, in the sense of how many other European countries have their citizens living and working in the UK. It has to be, I would think, in our benefit.
Exactly.
That there's a lot of foreigners in our country too.
And I know that there's a lot of talk, and there will be even more over the summer, of the no-deal scenario. And all that I can sort of say to people to try and reassure is that the government is having to look at no-deal scenario planning, because if a lot of you cast your mind back to 2016, when we woke up the day after the referendum, it was pretty clear that the government hadn't thought about what would happen if the decision was we want to leave the European Union.
In fact, the instigators of the vote in the first place left the government ipso facto, and they only stayed on in the European government as opposed to the British government, which is irony in itself.
So I think the government's trying to portray that it's being responsible in thinking, look, even though we think that there's going to be a deal, we have to plan for all eventualities in case there isn't a deal. Because if there isn't a deal, we don't want to fall off that cliff edge. Yeah?
I've seen even today that there is still talk about another referendum, doing another vote. It would seem that that is not an option from the government side, but the interest from the public, the concern from the public that those who are most affected aren't even represented in that vote. I know you can't maybe give an official point of view, but personally, that you're behind the scenes, you get to see it. Do you think there is any viability to that?
The government's line has always been there will not be a second referendum. We asked people and that it's not fair. People have made a decision, they've, you know, the people have spoken.
Although they weren't maybe educatedly informed?
And that you can't go back and sort of say you gave the wrong answer. You've got a red cross, let's go back and see if we can do it again. That's very difficult for most of us to, you know, live with. And as you say, particularly as a lot of people who feel as if they are more affected by this, actually didn't have the right to vote in that referendum. But what might be helpful is if I just say some of the citizens' rights that we think we've signed off on, which might help people. It's the first thing is that the agreement is anybody who is legally resident in the UK or in one of the 27 European Union member states at the date of withdrawal, final withdrawal, which so we have two dates.
We don't have a date yet.
We do. We have two dates. We stopped being full members in March 2019, yeah? And that was triggered by the Article 50. So that's the date that we stopped being full members. We no longer then have sit in and have the discussions around the table with the other European Union members. But we agreed a transition period. And the transition period runs until December 2020. And that transition period is simply put, is a period that allows us to do the gradual handover without it all being, we're members today, tomorrow we're not members, that's it, everything's changed. Because no, we're not going to be able to do it. I mean, essentially, if you begin to think about things like registration documents, are all the registration documents going to change overnight? No, they're not. So we leave on the 29th of March 2019, so we stop being full members, but actually there are transition arrangements through to December 2020. And until that date, for those of us that live here in Spain, that are legally resident, and I'll come back to that, nothing changes for us. We can continue to work, we can continue to use whatever healthcare facilities we're entitled to use, we'll continue to receive our pension.
Do you know if we'll be able to vote in the 2019 May elections locally? Because if we were members of European Union, we would.
Exactly. So, all right, well, I'll deal with that now and then I'll go back to some of the other citizens' rights. No, it's all right.
Hey, hey.
Free taxi 4 times a month and 25% discount on your car insurance if you're the zero hero.
Yeah, I'm here in Marbella, but it says here I'm in La Canada.
If you haven't mastered the lingo, don't worry. Linea Directa has a free GPS geolocator service that will come and find you.
Hey, hey.
Hello, hello, and I'm here with Linea Directa again. I'm going to be talking about the free breathalyzers that they offer. Yes, you heard correctly. Linea Directa is offering free single-use breathalyzers for any one part of their program. Now, as we know, breathalyzers are super important. The laws across Europe with drinking and driving are super strict, as they should be, as drinking and driving is really a thing that we should avoid. And of course, when you've had a couple of drinks, you're not quite sure if you're over the limit, if it's safe or not, and you would love to have something to tell you if you're over the limit, which is 0.5 grams, I'm pretty sure, is the limit here in Spain. That equates to a beer or a glass of wine, so it's really not that much. And so they offer these breathalyzers. They're single use, they're really nice, they're handy, and they fit in the pocket. They can go anywhere, you just breathe in it, sorry. And these little crystals go green. It's really exciting to see, to be honest. And the harbour right here, where I'm in front of, offers these, so come and pick some up if you are interested in collecting some of these. And Yeah, so you just blow into them, and Línea Directa offers these to all their customers for free, and they're wonderful, and you should really try it out and get with Línea Directa as soon as possible, because it's a wonderful insurance company that's doing some wonderful things across the coast to promote road safety.
Hey, hey.
What happened is that the government and the EU recognised that voting rights were going to be an issue, but it was one of the things that between them they decided could wait until the second phase of negotiations, yeah? And it wasn't until earlier this year that a lot of people in Spain started to point to the fact that 2019 is actually municipal elections, and if we don't have the right to vote before or by the end of this year, then we won't be able to vote in those elections either. And it's really important because we have British mayors, we have British councillors, but also for those of us that just happen to live here, we want to influence the local government that runs our services.
In order to do this, you need to be on the town padron.
It's not just the padron, you need to be on the padron, but you also need to have registered to vote. And quite often, sometimes in some town halls, you will be automatically given the forms for voting, and in other town halls you won't. So even if you're registered on the padron, please go along and check whether you are registered to vote.
So in theory, what we're saying is, as it stands at the moment with England leaving the European Union, it will not affect our ability to vote in the elections next year, but to do so you must be on the padron and specifically say, I would like to tick the box to be able to vote. So this is good news. Really?
Well, let me temper that a bit.
Okay.
So there are two things. Number one, whatever you do, make sure that you're on the padron and make sure that you're registered to vote, because if you're not, it's no use waiting until the last minute. I don't remember what the deadline is for, but make sure that you're registered before December of this year, yeah? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, the European Union sort of eventually announced earlier this year, right, we don't think voting is anything for us to be involved in, it's for member states to organise. So what this in effect means is that the United Kingdom has to have a bilateral agreement with Spain to allow us to vote. What the United Kingdom have had to do, what they have done, is they've indicated to Spain, Spaniards in the UK, we're not planning to change any of the arrangements. If they have the right to vote, they will continue to have the right to vote. This now opens the way for Spain to say the same for us. But they have to have a bilateral agreement. For those of you that have been very carefully watching what's happened in politics, it's got a little bit sticky because we've had changes in our UK cabinet. So we've had a change of Foreign Secretary and we've had a change of Secretary of State for the Department for exiting the European Union. So things kind of came to a bit of a standstill there. But then to add to that, there's been a change of government in Spain as well. So all of the preliminary discussions that we were having
haven't yet been reconfirmed.
Have to be renegotiated.
But in the meanwhile, register.
Sign up. We anticipate that the bilateral agreement will be signed in time for people to vote. Yeah. But if you're not on the register, it doesn't matter if that agreement's signed, you won't be able to vote. So go ahead and register.
This is a really important thing, and I know for our town hall, particularly in Marbella, this is a very big deal. They need to get the money the central government gives for each person signed on the town register, because that contributes towards cleaning the streets, getting medical care, the schooling, if you have to bury somebody, I mean, in fact, it covers all the costs of having us here and living in the community. And also, so it's very important to sign on the town register, because that's your way of contributing. You don't have to pay taxes for that. In fact, it gives you deductions for your taxes if you own a home here. If you rent an apartment or you rent a home, if you own a home or own an apartment, sign on the town register and also get that permission to vote, because it looks like we will be able to vote in the elections coming up next year.
Fingers crossed. The third thing that I would say to people is make sure that you're also registered with Extranjería. So that's 3 sets of registration you need to make sure that you've done. The reason for registering with Extranjería is that is actually the way in which you are counted as being legally resident. You don't have to have a permanencia, yeah? But you need to have registered with Extranjería. I don't know where it is in Marbella. I don't know whether it's the Policía Nacional that you have to go to, or whether there is an actual Extranjería department. I know where it is in other places. It's really important that you do that. if you
As an
were
instance,
here,
we have offices in Las Chapas, Nueva Andalucía, Marbella, all over the place. Please do contact the local tourist offices for Marbella specifically, because they will point you in the right direction.
so the reason why this is going to be important is when I say you will broadly be able to continue as you are now, that's on the understanding that you are legally resident. We know that there are lots of people who are not legally resident. I did an event out in...
You mean resident as on the padron or with their residencia?
with their residencia, yeah? So being on the padron is important. You've pointed out it's the town halls, access to services and whatever. But actually, what is described as legally resident is whether or not you are on the EU citizens. Some people will have had a green A4 piece of paper. Other people might have the one that's got a little bit that pulls away, like a little tarjeta in the side. Some people will have had the old ones. It's not, you will get a NIE anyway, but you need a NIE for all sorts of things, and nobody can function without a NIE anyway, so I'm completely convinced that everybody's got a NIE. But you need that green piece of paper that shows that you are registered as a foreign citizen living in Spain. If you've been here for more than 3 months, it is a legal requirement for you to do that. But more than that, that is going to be your access to being able to continue with whatever you have now post-Brexit. The other things that I wanted to mention are, so we sort of said you'll be able to live here, yeah? You won't have to have a visa or anything. You will also, whatever your healthcare arrangements are now, you continue to do this. So for older people in particular, lots of people will have their S1, which means that they've transferred their right to healthcare from the UK to Spain. And they were concerned, is that going to continue? There is an agreement that yes, that will continue after Brexit, but it will only continue if you're legally resident.
So one way or the other, get yourself registered legally, sign on the town register, get your
right to vote.
Your right to vote, and make sure you're up to date, because one way or the other, Brexit or no Brexit, you will need everything in order.
And make sure you've been to extranjeria, and make sure that you're signed up there. You don't have to have permanent residency, you just have to be legally resident. Yeah?
Thank you.
It's a brand new